Hello, everyone. This is Al Fadi, and I'd like to welcome you again to this particular series on the problems with the history of Islam and the emergence of Islam. But we've been really heavily focused on material from Dan Gibson, the same, author and archaeologist that we've been using his material in relationship to the direction of the Qibla and also the questionable history of Islam and so on and so forth. We did a brief overview about himself and about his material. Right now, we're going to deal with some of the criticism that basically arose as a result of his work. And with me here, no one better than Dr. J. Smith to handle these issues, and we will face these issues head on to tackle some of that criticism. Jay, I always call you Dan. You look like Dan. So, Jay, what are some of the what's some of the criticism that you received, or maybe Dan received as a result of his work?
We both received this criticism.
Yeah.
If you want to look at Fander Films, when we introduced this at Speaker's Corner, Mansour Ahmed really hammered us on this. And in fact, that video has gone viral all over the Muslim websites, that he just used Google Earth. How can you use Google Earth? Google Earth follows a flat plane Earth. It doesn't follow the contours, therefore it's inaccurate. And no wonder he got these results. But that's the irony. They had not read Dan's book. Dan would not be so foolish to use Google Earth. The only reason we even know about Google Earth in his books is because he used Google Earth pictures to show in the book how people, he just borrowed because it's free.
An image, basically.
An image of the Earth and of the city, because that's the best place to get pictures of it today. Just go get a picture of Guangzhou or Canton, or get a picture of Cheraman in Kerala. Use the Google Earth image and then show where the Qibla lines. He superimposed that. He didn't use that at all to use his GPS coordinations. What he did is he used the ASTER satellites. Now, what are ASTER? This is a Japanese satellite organization. They have these satellites that are geostationary. They're up on Earth, and they're not they're moving all the time, and they're taking pictures every 8 seconds. But let me just explain Google ASTER for those who are not aware. The name is Advanced Thermal Emission and Reflection Radiometer. ASTER, it's called. It takes 260,000 photos every 2 days. Each satellite. There's 3 of them doing this all the time. So it's always updating its material every day. With reference points just 96 feet apart. 96 feet, and you're up in space. You can see that's hugely accurate. Mm-hmm. The Advanced Spaceborne Thermal Emission and Reflection Radiometer obtains high resolution, 15 to 90 square meters per pixel, images of the Earth in 14 different wavelengths of electromagnetic spectrum, ranging from visible to thermal infrared light. I'm just taking this off their own site. I'm just reading what they tell us what it is. And that's why scientists use ASTER data to create detailed maps of land surfaces and the temperature, emissivity, reflective, and elevation. ASTER is the only high spatial resolution instrument on the Terra platform. It collects an average of 8 minutes of data per orbit. Every time it goes around, 8 minutes of data, right? So every 8 minutes. Now, what he did. Now, people say, well, yes, but how can you take a picture inside of a building, of a wall that's inside the building? No, that's not what Dan did. Dan didn't, because the satellites are looking down onto an object. They're looking down onto a mosque, a building. So what he would do is he would go, not only will he find the Qibla wall inside the building, he'd then go outside, and every building has a roof. And the roofs follow the walls, don't they?
That's right.
Do you know any roof that doesn't follow a wall? So you get the roof, that's the edge of the roof that follows the Qibla wall. Simple as that. It's either one of 4. You have one of 4 directions.
That's right.
Okay? And then he would take the satellite and he would direct it, he would take the image and direct it down onto that roof. And then he'd get the coordinates there. And that's why they're so accurate. There's nothing, you can't get anything more accurate than that. And for that reason, when people criticize him for that, they need to make sure that they read his book and follow what he says.
Well, obviously there is always emotional argument. There is no factual argument, sadly.
You can see why that they are emotional, because this is what Dan is doing. He's destroying everything they've known.
And he's doing it. He's such a gentle person. I mean, he's not really someone that's vicious or uses like arguments, like in terms of like polemics or anything. He's just presenting facts. That's all he's doing.
Yeah. Now, here's the second question. The other second question that comes up all the time is, hold on a minute. you don't get less accurate the further you go on. You actually get more accurate the further you go on. So are you trying to? They're criticizing Dan for saying the earliest Arabs actually were more accurate than the later Arabs, as we saw in that graph. The ones who were the Nabateans, because these are Nabateans who were doing the earliest Qiblas, were a lot more accurate than the ones who were doing the Meccan Qiblas, which start in 727.
In other words, by the time we get to Mecca, people would have perfected the science that they were using.
That's usually how it goes.
Right.
What they're not taking into consideration is Roman roads. See, Romans were the ones that created roads. Now, they weren't the only ones that created, but they were started the whole idea of making roads, which was then copied by many other empires. What happened was, as those who were in the Arab Peninsula and those who lived in Damascus and, of course, in Baghdad, they started using these roads. Correct. Once you start using roads, you don't use the stars anymore. You don't need to. The roads are already laid out. You have mile markers along the roads or kilometer markers, whatever is the distance they use. They would use whatever the distance was they would use at that time. And because of that, the whole art of using the stars got lost. Now, what was fascinating is Dan went back to find out what they're using, and that's where the Bedouins came in so handy, because the Bedouins still have not lost the art of following the stars. Why? Because the Bedouins don't use roads.
That's right. They're still nomadic.
They're still nomadic.
Yeah.
They go across the deserts even today. And he asked them, what was it they used? Now, let's put up and let's look and see what they're using. Something as crude as that. That's a Kamal. A Kamal is a block of wood on a string which has knots on it. And they always, to know north and south, they always use the North Star. And you can see the North Star anywhere in the world. That's the beauty about it. And it stays in the same place every day, all the time. It never moves. That's why it's such a great star. And it's so bright.
That's right.
See, I don't know this because we don't use this anymore. We've lost this idea. But look and see how simple this artifact. See that picture there? That's the Kamal. They would then look at the horizon and see where the North Star was. And they would take a block of wood with a string that they put in their mouth that had knots along it, and they'd hold that string there, and they would pull it up, and they would keep the bottom part of the block on the horizon, and as they pulled it towards themselves, as soon as it reached the North Star, touched the North Star, they'd look and see what knot it was, had reached the string and knot. And that's how they knew how much distant it was, exactly where they were in relation to the North Star, because it stayed constant. Why is it we don't do that today? Because we don't need to do that today. We're not taught how to do that today. That system is still used by the Bedouins today. Now, that's for north and south. What did they use for east and west? Well, before that, another thing they would do is they would then, for east and west, they would want to know, they would use stars. Now let's look at the next graph. Let's look at the next slide. These, they had chosen 32 stars that they put on a compass. There's the round compass that you see at the top. And as they used these 32 stars, they knew exactly, they would know how far, and they would know, and they would memorize these 32 stars. Now, we don't do that anymore today. And there you can see the names of all the stars. And they would go towards one star that they would, let's just use this one right here. I'll put it up there. There, see the green? That's the Naka. There's the Naka star, which is the northwest, okay? There's the green. I've just surrounded. They would walk a number of steps towards that star. The number of steps were already delineated by the caravans who had gone before. So let's say it's 200,000 steps towards that star. Well, how do you count 200,000? They would use poetry. They would use cadence. And as they would march, because they would be on the ground, all the goods would be on the camels. As they walked, they would use poetry to keep them know that this poem had 88,000 steps. This other poem had 9,500 steps. So they would use this poetry and walk it so they don't have to sit there and count 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way. By the time they got to the poem, they've done 8,200 steps. They mark it on a piece of paper.
So that's their system.
That's their system. And they knew, you have to go towards Naka, 200,000 steps. Then you need to go to this star. Let's put another one up there, and that is Altir. See, I've put the second one up there now. Then you go to that one, another 2,300 steps. By doing that, they created their west, east, and west directions. And so it was a number of how many pieces of poetry. That's why even today, camel herders. You can hear them singing and chanting these beautiful poems. The reason they're doing and singing and chanting those poems is so they can find their way.
Right.
Completely lost on most people today because we don't do it. See, Dan figured that out because he lived amongst the Bedouin. He asked them how they did it. And they said, this is how we've done it for generations. And we still do it that way. And they had to get them absolutely accurate, because if they got even a few steps off, they would miss an oasis. Remember we talked about the cisterns. The Nabateans had these cisterns. They were hidden all over the desert.
And they wanted to store water.
And they would go from cistern to cistern to cistern to cistern, and they would know these many steps to Naqab, these many steps to Al-Tir, and then you'll see a cistern there. And usually it was always where the cisterns were, is where they would go, their directions would go. Now, to get to those cisterns, sometimes you'd have to go around an outcropping, or you have to go around on a pile of dunes. These were all used, and sometimes there'd be a mountain in the way, and that they would then say this many to that side of the mountain, and then this many steps to that side of the mountain. Or they would say this many pieces of this poetry will get you there.
Yeah, and listen, I spent time in the desert, in the wilderness, and we use certain rocks and mountains as markers.
They use all kinds of markers. They use old stream beds, that many steps to this stream bed. Then at the stream bed, turn and move over. And now I was thinking, as I was reading this, I was saying, we used to do that in the Himalayas as a kids. We lived at 7,000 feet, and you'd have to go down to 2,000 feet. Then you have to jump up to 10,000 feet. Then you had to go down to 2,000 feet again. And then you have to jump up to around 20,000 feet for the third ridge. But there were no roads back then. What we used to do, we used to go and we would count. We would say, go down to the stream and look for a huge flat rock. When you get to that flat rock, look up towards your left, and you'll see a tree that's been hit by lightning. Go to that tree.
We use these kind
and
of
then from
markers,
there, you'll see a saddle in the hill. Go to that saddle, and you will find a stream. Get some water there. So we would just use these markers, much like they did. We didn't count steps because everybody on a mountain going up and down would have different size steps. Unlike a desert where you have pretty much the same steps. It would be about 3 meters per step. So I was thinking that's what we did as kids. And we would write this up in a book, and we called it the Ophrisia. And to get to a place called Dale Sadi, you'd have to go to 6 different landmarks to get to Dale Sadi, which was a 2-day trip. And I'm saying we're still doing that in the 20th century. As a kid, I used to do that in the Himalayas. It's the exact same thing that the Arabs were doing in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th century.
And when you said 3 meters per step, you meant like for the camel, or 3 steps per meter for the humans, you mean?
I'm sorry, it's a meter per step. Did I say 3 meters?
Yeah.
Boy, that's a pretty big
I was
giant.
just wondering if you're talking about the camel. I just want to clarify for people. Yeah,
Thanks for correcting me. No,
no problem.
It's about a step is about a meter long.
That's right.
So fascinating. Even in the 20th century, we're still doing what the Arabs were doing.
Right.
Now, let's continue on. So when did this, or actually, why don't we finish this episode here, and then we'll get back. And what I want to do is looking at some of the tools they use, but also I want to know, when did the Qibla change? When did the Qibla actually change, and why is that significant?
And how that would tie into...
And then we're going to wrap this all up and bring it to a conclusion.
Very good. So hopefully everyone has been enjoying this. We, as, of course, polemists, apologists, you expect, of course, pushbacks. You expect criticism. But the idea is we don't like to run away from this. Actually, we welcome, the critics. We welcome their comments. And that's the beauty about what we're doing, is we take any argument and we present our case, our rebuttal to it. And hopefully now we have clarified a number of these objections that were raised. And we'll see you next time as we continue this particular dialogue concerning this topic. Have a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, hit the bell so that you don't miss future videos. And please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/CIRA International. And together we can introduce Muslims to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you.